questions, if you will. So what better person to have than Pete Williams? He's following all of the ins and outs of these electoral vote objections. And look, we may have as few as 3, Arizona, Georgia, and Pennsylvania, or as many as 6 with Nevada, Michigan, and possibly Wisconsin on there. And I'm going to ask the question that I get asked by some various family members. There's no way any of this works, right? And so, Pete,
right.
How do you answer that question?
I answer it right, and there's 2 ways to look at it, Chuck. One is just from the sheer political numbers that you need to win in both houses, because if there are objections, and there will be, they're not sustained unless both the House and Senate agree, and they may not win in either. The objections may fail in both the House and Senate, but there's no way they're going to work in both. So we know what the end of this play is going to be. We just don't know how it's going to get there. This is literally the oldest thing that the federal government does. This is the first thing that the very first Congress did, was to count the electoral votes. And this is what the Constitution says is the role of the Vice President, also known as the Senate President. He is to open all the certificates, and the votes shall be counted. That's all the Constitution says. Now, there's a long federal law that was passed 133 years ago that gives more guidance to the process, and that's how we know how this whole objection system works. And we know, Chuck, that there have been in some states, in 5 or 6 states, where Biden won, Republicans have nonetheless mailed to the Vice President's office their own slates of electors. Here's 2 of them. This is the one that came from Georgia and the one that came from Arizona. And they both say, you ought to count our votes, not those other votes. I just make one other point. The Electoral Counting Act, this ancient, badly drawn statute that is guiding the process today, basically says that the job of the Congress is to ask itself this question: are these votes that we have in our hands that came to the floor in these mahogany boxes that we see every 4 years, the votes of the legitimately certified electors from the state, yes or no? That's the decision they're supposed to make. So technically, looking into whether the state improperly allowed mail-in ballots to be counted if they weren't signed on the envelopes, the way the system is supposed to work is that's a decision for the states to make. And once they get to Congress, the question for Congress is a very simple one. Are these the legitimate electors certified by the governor or not?
Well, that's the formality of it all, and yet we are going to see, like I said, a lot more political theater that ultimately is just going to take longer to get us to the point where we certify this election.